Thank you. We're going to move on and talk with John over here, because clearly one of the issues of the 21st century is privacy. Most digital denizens have a false sense of security about online privacy and don't understand the implications that the internet is actually a public space. So my first question is, what exactly is privacy in the digital media world, and why does it matter? And second, most of us don't read, as you saw, the privacy policy in the terms of agreement when we register for websites or when we use social media, and everything that we do online, our online presence, is creating a digital footprint. So how is our digital footprint putting our privacy at risk? What can we do about it? And why aren't default settings enough privacy protection? And then if we get to it, I'd like to talk a little bit about net neutrality, because it's on the table again. And what is the status, and why should the students in this room care about net neutrality?
All right. I think, first of all, you all should remember that in the state of California, we have a constitutional right to privacy. It's in the first article of the California Constitution. It's not explicitly in the U.S. Constitution, but reluctantly in California. So what is privacy? Well, I think probably is still the right to be left alone. And I think that that is something that goes over into the digital world as well. There's no reason that those fundamental human rights should not be adhered to and followed in the digital space. It's gotten more complex to do that. And one of the things that particularly problematic are, I think, is the extent to which it's become a business model to essentially spy on people, and to do it in a couple of different ways. There are the issues around what it is that you yourself decide that you think you're going to share with friends and that you affirmatively post out there. And there's all sorts of pitfalls possible with that. And then the other area is the sort of digital footprint you leave when you surf from one website to another website, or when you enter all of your searches in, you know, as the person said, it's like your diary. And that's what Google is doing. They're reading your diary because they keep a log on everything that you search for. Another important thing to remember about this in the business model is why do they do this? We may think of ourselves as customers and consumers of the Facebooks and of the Google. We're not Google's customer. We're not consumers of their product. We are their product. We are being sold. Now, and what's really being sold is our intentions and our aspirations and what we've revealed online in various ways, and that's being sold to the highest bidder for advertising. Question about policies in terms of services. You know, I don't think they should be called privacy policies. There's been some interesting research around that suggests that people, when they see that there's a privacy policy, that means that your privacy is being guaranteed. Well, that's not what a privacy policy is at all. It is essentially an explanation of how they're going to spy on you. Why do you got to be able to spy policies? I've argued that for a long time. People don't seem to agree with me. Anyway, it is not surprising that folks in this room didn't, many of them say that you make a habit of reading privacy policies. I think someone did a study where if you read every privacy policy of every website that you went to in a year, you probably would spend over a month just reading privacy policies. And they are all written in language that is intended to obfuscate and confuse, and probably by lawyers who are being paid by the word to make them complex. They really, for the most part, don't, it seems to me, provide very much useful information on what's going on. Defaults. You always third question? That was one.
Net neutrality.
That was, the defaults was, net neutrality was the last one.
How is our digital footprint putting our privacy at risk? And what can we do about it? And what can we do about it?
Well, again, you allowed a business model to emerge which sort of suggests to us that we're getting online free, and all these things are free services, when in fact we're paying with our privacy and with information about us. And it seems to me that those digital dossiers are very much threats to your privacy. Eric Schmidt was sitting there essentially saying, well, if there's something that you don't want somebody to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it at all. That's nonsense. I mean, there are a whole host of things that we would want to do in the privacy of our own home that we don't feel that we need to show the world, and it's perfectly appropriate, for instance, to get up in the morning and go to the bathroom, and, you know, need to be embarrassed about that, but you want to do it privately. I suspect that most of us would want to have whatever sort of intimate relations we have with our loved ones in our own bedroom or whatever, without that being out in front of the world. So the notion that we shouldn't be doing something at all, if we are worried about it being private, is wrong-headed, and it says something about the Google approach to the world. They like to suggest that their mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible. Well, that may be true, except when it's information about them. Try to find out about Eric Schmidt. There was a notorious article that CNET tried to do, and they were showing how much you could reveal about a person by Googling them. How much could be revealed, how much you could learn. Well, they ran the article, and there were all sorts of things that Schmidt was reported how much money he gave to certain political points of view and all that sort of thing. Schmidt's response to that was to ban CNET reporters from interviews for over a year. So these guys in the industry sometimes have some two-faced approaches. Defaults, I want to quickly say one thing about that. This is where you get into trouble when you, defaults are not set up to benefit the user, they're set up to benefit the service that is offering its services to you. So, for instance, it's like almost no one changes default settings. It's like in the United States and around the world, the most common password is still password. Because that's just the way it came.
Anyone have that as a password?
But I mean, so the default settings, if someone were genuinely privacy friendly, say on Facebook, would be for the post that you make to go to the smallest number of people. That's not the default setting. Now, it's not public, but it is friends of friends can read. Well, if you have 600 friends, I know quite a number of people in your generation who have that number of friends, and then each one of them have 600 friends. Start to think about how many people are actually able to read what you think are relatively small posts. Well, that's the default setting, and most people don't bother to go in and change it. That's the sort of thing that it's a stickiness that retains where it is. I want to throw out one other thing, and then I'll touch on net neutrality if it's not too long, and that's the notion of privacy by obscurity. Back when I was young and foolish and did young and foolish things, and maybe got written about, and maybe it was even on the front page of the newspaper, you wouldn't probably know about that 4 or 5 years later, because it was all on paper records. And if you had considerable motivation to go down to the courthouse and dig through paper records, you could find all sorts of things. But there was a sort of protecting check that you had to go through a lot of effort to do that kind of thing, and you needed to have the motivation to go in and dig through public records to put it all together. Now, I used to do that as a reporter, and you do it on someone who was running for a high political office or something, but the average person didn't really usually come out. And that is this concept of privacy by obscurity, just sort of self-correcting over time. It doesn't work in the digital age. And once you put it out there, bam, any search can find it, and it stays with us. And as a society, we haven't yet figured out how we should be dealing with it. Eric Schmidt himself said something, sort of the notion that maybe people ought to be able to delete their digital record when they become a certain age or something like that, because we need to let everyone your age and a little younger get out and experiment and make a few mistakes without it all being down in the digital dossier. It is true that technology goes faster than our rules and regulations and ways to govern. That's just always sort of the way it is. Net neutrality. Now, what can we do about all this? Well, one of the things we can be doing about it right now, for instance, is all of the popular browsers are able to send a message which is a do not track message, which is supposed to go out and tell companies, don't put those cookies down and follow me all around the internet. The problem is that nobody is required to honor it. One of the things that needs to happen is that there needs to be regulations that would require that if a do not track message is sent, that it would in fact be honored. The California Attorney General has sponsored a law that is a step in the right direction, which now requires that companies explain what they do if they get such a message, but they don't. It's a transparency, and the idea is if you tell people what's going on, then they'll be able to make decisions, but there are no specific requirements. Practical things that you can be doing. How many of you are logged into Facebook all the time? Well, okay, that's a problem. How about?
Excuse me, do you mean don't sign out?
I mean, you should always, when you go on Facebook, right? Okay, do what you want to do and sign up. You should do that with any login service. You should never leave something open and log in, because that gives extra ability for you and your other activities to be tracking you, and for Facebook to follow you to other sites and so on. But you want to go to a site and use it, fine, log in, but then log out. I don't know how many of you have Gmail, probably a lot of you. I mean, that you may do the same thing with Gmail and leave that permanently logged. You shouldn't. That lets Google really identify you and tie everything to you specifically to your named account. If you do a search and you're not signed into Google, they know your IP address, but they don't know you specifically as an individual account. So it's always a good practice to log out of things. You should set your browsers so you do not accept cookies from third parties. You should clear your cookies. These are all relatively simple things to do in browsers. You should set your browser so that it clears cookies when you close the browser.